The shaft's metal walls scraped against Rowan Proust's shoulders as she crawled through the narrow tunnel, her breath fogging the small beam of her emergency light. Behind her, the rhythmic clang-clang-clang of security boots echoed through the ventilation system, growing closer with each heartbeat. The tunnel's recycled air tasted of rust and desperation. Sector 7 breach. Unauthorized access to restricted archives. The voice crackled through the comm system that ran alongside the tunnel. Rowan pressed herself against the cold metal, trying to slow her breathing. She shouldn't have gone to the old data cores. She shouldn't have questioned the star chart her grandmother had passed down through 7 generations of keepers. But the doubts had been eating at her for months. The stellar positions recorded in their ancient navigation logs didn't match what the ship's sensors were detecting. Constellations that should have changed over their centuries-long journey remained frustratingly constant. The Cygnus Nebula appeared in the same position relative to their ship month after month, year after year. Either the universe had stopped moving, or the Endurance wasn't going where everyone believed. A sharp turn ahead led to a vertical drop. Rowan grabbed the maintenance ladder and began her descent, the precious data pad tucked against her chest. 3 levels down, she could hear the security team splitting up, their voices growing fainter as they searched other passages. Her fingers found the access panel to Deck 12, the agricultural sector where the constant hum of hydroponic systems would mask her escape. The panel slid open with a soft hiss, releasing the humid air of the growing chambers. Rowan dropped into the narrow space between 2 massive cultivation tanks, their green glow casting eerie shadows on her face. The data pad screen flickered with the impossible information she discovered: star positions that didn't match the chart, navigation logs that showed the same coordinates repeating in endless cycles. "This can't be right," she whispered, but even as she spoke, she knew it was. The Endurance hadn't been journeying toward humanity's new home for the past 300 years. They'd been traveling in a perfect circle, like a rat in a cage made of stars. 3 days later, Rowan sat in the Keeper's chamber, the sacred room where her family had maintained the last known star chart for 15 generations. The walls were lined with ancient stellar maps, hand-drawn by the original colonists who'd fled Earth's dying biosphere. Each map told a story of hope, trajectories calculated by desperate scientists who'd staked humanity's future on reaching a distant world called New Eden. Rowan's great-great-grandmother had been among those original cartographers, one of the brilliant minds who'd plotted humanity's escape from a poisoned Earth. Her grandmother's voice echoed in memory: "We are the guardians of humanity's future, child. Without the charts, we are lost in the void." The weight of that legacy pressed down on Rowan's shoulders like the gravity of a dying star. She traced her finger along the route to New Eden, the promised world that should have been reached decades ago according to the original calculations. The ship's official reports always cited navigational complications and unforeseen stellar drift to explain their delayed arrival. But Rowan had run the numbers herself, factoring in relativistic effects and the ship's documented velocity. They should have been there by now. They should have been there 50 years ago. But they were already lost, weren't they? Rowan pulled up the data she'd stolen from the restricted archives. The evidence was undeniable. The same pulsars appeared in the ship's sensor logs every 18 months, the same nebula formations, the same distant galaxies. The Endurance was following a programmed course that led nowhere. The chamber's door chimed. "Enter," Rowan called, quickly hiding the data pad beneath her grandfather's journal. Commander Hayes stepped inside, his silver uniform pristine as always. Behind him came 2 security officers, their hands resting on their shock batons. "Keeper Proust," Hayes said, his voice carrying the formal tone reserved for official business. "There's been a report of unauthorized access to the navigation archives. I haven't left this chamber in days, Commander. You can check the logs." Hayes smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, we have. Curious thing, those logs. They show your biometric signature in Sector 7 at 0347 hours, 3 days ago. The same time someone bypassed 17 security protocols to access files that have been sealed since launch." Rowan's heart hammered against her ribs. That's impossible. The archives are restricted to command staff only. Precisely. Hayes nodded to his officers. Which makes this a matter of ship security. We'll need to conduct a thorough search of your quarters and this chamber. I'm sure you understand. As the security officers began ransacking the ancient charts and navigation instruments, Rowan's hand moved slowly toward the data pad hidden beneath the journal. If they found it, everything would be over. The truth about their endless journey would die with her in the ship's detention cells. One officer was examining the stellar maps on the far wall. The other was checking the computer terminals. Hayes watched Rowan with calculating eyes. You know, he said conversationally, your family has served admirably as keepers. 15 generations of faithful service. It would be unfortunate if that legacy ended in a disgrace. The threat was clear. Rowan's fingers closed around the data pad. In one smooth motion, she activated its emergency broadcast function and hurled it toward the chamber's main display screen. The pad struck the wall and shattered, but not before uploading its contents to the ship's general information network. Alarms began blaring immediately. Hayes's face went white with rage. Seize her. Rowan was already moving. She grabbed her grandmother's ceremonial navigation compass, a heavy brass instrument, and swung it at the nearest security officer. The man stumbled backward, giving her just enough space to reach the chamber's emergency exit. Her fingers flew over the access panel, entering the override code her father had taught her years ago. The hidden door slid open, revealing a maintenance tunnel that connected to the ship's primary life support systems. As Rowan dove into the narrow passage, she heard Hayes shouting orders behind her. Lock down all decks. Find her. And scrub that data from every terminal on the ship. But it was too late. As Rowan crawled through the tunnel, she could hear the information alarms echoing through the ship's corridors. The truth was spreading through the Endurance like wildfire, and there was no containing it now. The maintenance tunnels of the lower decks were a maze of corroded pipes and failing electrical systems. Rowan had been moving through them for 6 hours, following the faint emergency lighting toward the ship's industrial sector. Her throat was raw from breathing the recycled air, and her shoulders ached from crawling through passages barely wide enough for a person. The constant hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the metal around her, a sound that had been the heartbeat of her entire civilization for 3 centuries. She emerged into Deck 23, the forgotten level where the ship's original construction equipment lay dormant. The air here was thin and cold, kept at minimum life support to conserve resources. Or so they'd been told. Massive fabrication units sat like sleeping giants in the darkness, their surfaces covered with 3 centuries of dust. But as Rowan moved between the machinery, she noticed something troubling: maintenance logs that showed these abandoned systems had been recently serviced. Someone had been down here, keeping the old equipment functional despite official reports of their obsolescence. A sound made her freeze: footsteps, moving carefully among the machinery. Rowan pressed herself against the hull of an old cargo loader, her heart racing. The steps came closer, accompanied by a soft voice muttering calculations. Trajectory adjustment at Mark 774 should have corrected for stellar drift, but the same coordinates appear again at Mark 892. Unless we're not actually traveling toward any destination at all. Rowan recognized the voice. Kai Chen, one of the ship's junior pilots. She'd seen him in the navigation briefings, always asking questions that the senior staff dismissed as irrelevant. Carefully, she peered around the cargo loader. Kai stood before a makeshift workstation constructed from salvaged computer parts. Holographic star charts floated in the air above his jury-rigged display, showing overlapping navigation patterns. His dark hair was disheveled, and his pilot's uniform was stained with grease and coolant fluid. "I know you're there," he said without turning around. "Been tracking your movement through the maintenance sensors for the past hour." Rowan stepped into view, keeping her hands visible. "You're not with security?" "Security?" Kai laughed bitterly. "They've been hunting me for 2 weeks. Ever since I started asking why the same stars keep appearing in our navigation scans. He gestured to the holographic displays. I've been down here trying to make sense of it all. Then your little broadcast lit up the ship's network, and suddenly everything clicked. The displays showed the same evidence Rowan had discovered. The repeating stellar positions, the circular flight path, the impossible navigation data. But Kai had gone further, correlating the information with the ship's power consumption and life support usage patterns. We're not just flying in circles, Kai said, his voice hollow with realization. We're doing it deliberately. Someone's been programming our course corrections to maintain this exact orbital pattern for 300 years. A new voice spoke from the shadows, and I know who. They both spun around as a figure stepped into the light. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's chief archivist, emerged from behind a towering data storage unit. Her usually pristine lab coat was torn and dirty, and she carried a portable data core in her arms like a precious child. Dr. Vasquez, Rowan breathed. They said you were reassigned to the outer research stations. Reassigned to disappear, more likely. Elena set down the data core and activated its display interface. I've been hiding in the archives for 5 days, ever since I discovered discrepancies in the historical logs. Birth rates, death rates, resource allocation, none of it matches what the official records show. The data core projected a complex timeline into the air above them. Elena pointed to specific dates highlighted in red. Every 50 years, there's a purge. Population reduction events disguised as equipment failures or medical emergencies. Always targeting individuals who ask too many questions or show signs of inconvenient intelligence. Kai stepped closer to examine the data. You're saying they've been culling the population? I'm saying they've been managing it. Keeping us at optimal levels for their experiment. Elena's eyes burned with anger. Because that's all we are to them, test subjects in the galaxy's longest-running psychological study. A distant explosion shook the deck beneath their feet. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the machinery in pulsing red illumination. Through the ship's communication system, Commander Hayes's voice echoed, "All citizens return to assigned quarters immediately. Security teams are conducting a full sweep for terrorist activity." Terrorist activity, Rowan repeated with disgust. Is that what they're calling it? Elena was already packing up her data core. They'll find us eventually. This deck won't stay hidden much longer. She paused, looking between Rowan and Kai. But I know where we can find answers. The original command section, Level 0. It was sealed off after launch, but I found references to it in the oldest archive files. Level 0 doesn't exist, Kai protested. The ship schematics show Level 1 as the highest deck. Official schematics. Elena shouldered her equipment. But I've seen the original construction plans. There's an entire section above the main bridge, accessible only through the old executive elevator shaft. If anyone knows the truth about this ship, they'll be there. Another explosion, closer this time. The sound of cutting torches echoed through the maintenance tunnels. Security teams were burning through the access panels. We need to move, Rowan said. Now. They ran deeper into the industrial sector, Elena leading them toward a service elevator that hadn't been used in decades. As they waited for the ancient machinery to activate, Kai grabbed Rowan's arm. Once we go up there, there's no going back. If we find what I think we're going to find, then we expose it, Rowan finished. Whatever the cost. The elevator lurched upward, carrying them toward answers they weren't sure they wanted to find. Level 0 was a tomb of polished metal and humming machinery. The executive elevator had opened onto a pristine corridor that looked exactly as it had 3 centuries ago. White walls, soft lighting, and an atmosphere of sterile perfection that made Rowan's skin crawl. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the recycled air, as if the very environment was designed to amplify the sound of intruders. This doesn't make sense, Kai whispered. How can everything be so clean? The rest of the ship shows 3 centuries of wear, but this place looks like it was built yesterday. Elena consulted her portable scanner. Automated maintenance systems. Full environmental controls. But look at this, she showed them the device's readout. Power consumption levels that would support a significant population. Someone's been keeping this level operational, and not just for storage. She paused at a junction in the corridor, studying the readings more carefully. Life signs. Multiple contacts, straight ahead. And they're old. Very old. They moved carefully toward the source of the readings, passing doors marked with titles that had been obsolete for generations. Executive Committee, Colonial Planning Division, Psychological Wellness Department. Each door bore brass nameplates tarnished with age, but the electronic locks were modern, recently installed. The last door was unmarked, its surface bearing only a small placard, Primary Observation Deck. Through the door's small window, they could see into a circular room dominated by massive displays showing every section of the Endurance. Dozens of screens monitored population centers, work assignments, birth rates, death statistics, all updated in real time. At the center of the room sat three figures in chairs that seemed more like thrones, connected to the ship systems by cables and tubes that disappeared into their bodies. Dear God, Elena breathed. They're still alive. The figures were ancient beyond measure, their bodies more machine than human after centuries of cybernetic enhancement. Nutrient tubes fed directly into their torsos, while neural interfaces connected their preserved brains to the ship's central computer. Their eyes, the only recognizably human parts remaining, tracked the data streams flowing across the displays with mechanical precision. Rowan felt sick. They've been watching us. All of us. For 300 years. Not just watching, Kai said, pointing to a control panel covered with adjustment dials and programming interfaces. Controlling. Look at those systems, course corrections, population management, resource allocation. They're running the entire ship like a laboratory, Elena finished. With us as the specimens. The center figure's head turned slightly, ancient eyes focusing on the door. When it spoke, its voice came from speakers throughout the room, a synthesized approximation of human speech. Visitors. How unexpected. Please, enter. We have much to discuss. Elena grabbed Rowan's arm. We should leave. Now. But Rowan was already moving toward the door. No. I need answers. The door slid open at their approach, and they stepped into the observation chamber. The three figures watched them with expressions that might have been amusement, if such ancient faces were capable of emotion. Welcome to the Bridge of the Endurance, the center figure said. I am Director Chen, or what remains of him. These are my colleagues, Director Okafor and Director Petrov. We have been the ship's guidance committee since launch. Guidance committee? Kai's voice cracked with outrage. You've been lying to everyone for 3 centuries. Lying? Director Chen's synthesized laugh was a horrible sound. We have been conducting the most important experiment in human history. The Endurance Project was never about colonization, young pilot. It was about evolution. Elena stepped forward, her scanner recording everything. Evolution? You mean eugenics? Population control? Murder? We prefer the term selective pressure, Director Okafor spoke for the first time. Earth's population had grown stagnant. Comfortable. Weak. We provided the stress necessary for adaptation and growth. The displays around them showed population statistics spanning 3 centuries, birth rates carefully managed, genetic diversity monitored and adjusted, social structures manipulated to produce specific outcomes. It was a masterwork of social engineering, and it made Rowan feel physically ill. New Eden was never the destination, she said, understanding flooding through her. There is no New Eden. There is now, Director Petrov replied. Here. On this ship. We have created a perfect society, stable population, optimal resource utilization, social harmony maintained through careful management. The Endurance itself has become humanity's new world. Kai was studying the navigation displays. The circular course. You're keeping us in the same region of space because you don't want us to actually go anywhere. Precisely. Distance traveled is irrelevant. The journey itself is the destination. Director Chen leaned forward in his mechanical throne. In 300 years, we have guided your evolution from confused refugees into something greater. Stronger. More resilient. By killing anyone who gets too smart, Elena said. By culling the population like livestock. By ensuring only the best survive and reproduce. Natural selection, accelerated and refined. Director Okafor's ancient eyes gleamed. You three are perfect examples. Intelligent, resourceful, adaptive. You discovered our secret despite centuries of careful concealment. You represent the future of human evolution. Rowan felt something cold settle in her stomach. You're not angry that we found you. Angry? We are delighted. You have proven that the experiment is succeeding beyond our most optimistic projections. Director Chen's synthesized voice took on what might have been warmth. We offer you a choice. Join us. Help us guide the ship into its 4th century. Become part of something greater than yourselves. The offer hung in the air like poison. Around them, the displays continued their endless monitoring of human lives, reducing 30,000 people to statistics and algorithms. And if we refuse? Kai asked. Then you will be processed like all the others who could not adapt to their role in our great work. Director Petrov's voice held no emotion whatsoever. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. The security teams will breach this level within the hour. As if summoned by his words, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. On the displays, they could see armed security forces moving through the corridors, searching every deck with methodical precision. Elena grabbed Rowan's arm. We need to get out of here. Now. But Rowan was staring at the control panels, her mind racing. No. We need to end this. All of it. And this? Director Chen's laugh was like metal scraping against stone. Child, you cannot end 300 years of careful work with a moment's rage. Watch me, Rowan said, and lunged for the nearest control interface. The ship's detention level had become their temporary sanctuary. After fighting their way out of level 0, Rowan, Kai, and Elena had found refuge in the abandoned security stations, using Elena's archival access codes to hide from the ongoing manhunt. For 12 hours, they'd been planning their next move while the ship above them descended into chaos. The truth about their endless orbital journey had spread through the ship's communication networks like wildfire, igniting 3 centuries of suppressed questions and doubts. The truth about the Endurance had spread despite the command crew's efforts to contain it. Riots had broken out on 7 different decks. Work assignments had been abandoned as people demanded answers about their lives, their purpose, their stolen centuries. Children asked parents why the same stars appeared outside their windows year after year. Engineers questioned why certain ship systems seemed designed for indefinite operation rather than a finite journey. The careful social order that had been maintained for 3 centuries was crumbling in a matter of hours, replaced by something far more dangerous: hope. The ship's navigation core, Elena said, studying the schematics they'd stolen from level 0. Her fingers traced the complex pathways through the ship's central processing systems. If we can access it directly, we can reprogram the ship's course. Point us toward an actual destination instead of this endless circuit. Kai shook his head, exhaustion evident in his voice. The core is protected by 3 separate security systems, plus whatever the directors have added over the centuries. Automated defenses, biometric locks, probably some kind of dead man switch to prevent exactly what we're trying to do. It's suicide. Everything we've done has been suicide, Rowan replied, checking the charge on her stolen security weapon. But we're still here. And 30,000 people are counting on us to stay that way. They developed a plan of sorts. Elena would use her archival access to open the initial security barriers, Kai would handle the navigation reprogramming, and Rowan would create a distraction to draw the security forces away from the core. It wasn't a good plan, but it was the only one they had. Elena handed Rowan a small device. Localized EMP generator. It'll shut down the security systems in a 30-meter radius, but only for about 5 minutes. 5 minutes to change the course of human history, Kai said with gallows humor. No pressure. Rowan looked at her companions, the archivist who'd risked everything to preserve truth, and the pilot who'd refused to accept convenient lies. They were tired, frightened, and completely outmatched. They were also the only hope 30,000 people had of escaping their orbital prison. My grandmother used to say that stars are distant suns, Rowan said quietly. That's somewhere out there, other worlds circle other lights. Maybe it's time we found out if she was right. Elena smiled, the first genuine expression Rowan had seen from her in days. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She also would have hated what they did to her star charts. Rowan stood, checking the power cell on the EMP device. Let's go show some ancient monsters what evolution really looks like. The navigation core occupied the entire heart of Level 10, a cathedral of computing power surrounded by layers of security barriers and automated defenses. Rowan approached from the maintenance tunnels while Elena and Kai used the main corridors, their different routes timed to converge at exactly 0400 hours. Rowan's tunnel emerged directly beneath the core's primary access console. She could hear the security teams above, their boots echoing on the metal deck plating as they established a perimeter. Commander Hayes's voice crackled through their communications, coordinating the defense of the ship's most vital system. Remember, Hayes was saying, these terrorists cannot be allowed to reach the navigation controls. The directors have made it clear that ship security takes precedence over all other considerations, including civilian casualties. Civilian casualties. Rowan thought of the 30,000 people living their entire lives in ignorance, never knowing they'd been reduced to test subjects in someone else's experiment. Her finger tightened on the EMP trigger. Elena's voice whispered through their improvised communication link, in position. Security barrier Alpha is accessible. Navigation interface ready, Kai reported. I can see the core from here, but there are at least 20 guards between me and the control room. 20 guards, Rowan repeated. Against 3 of us. Actually, a new voice said through the comm link, you might want to recalculate those odds. Rowan's heart jumped. The voice belonged to Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's senior medical officer. Dr. Kim? How did you? Your little broadcast reached more people than you think, Kim replied. I've got 47 crew members from 7 different departments, all very interested in learning the truth about where we've been going for the past 300 years. Through the deck plating, Rowan could hear the sound of multiple groups moving through the corridors. The security teams were suddenly facing resistance from citizens they'd never expected to fight. Dr. Kim, you need to get your people to safety, Elena protested. This is too dangerous. Dr. Vasquez, Kim interrupted, I've been treating the victims of equipment failures and medical emergencies for 15 years. Now I know they weren't accidents. These people deserve justice. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the ship's hull. The revolution had begun in earnest. Rowan activated the EMP device. Above her, the lights went out as the security systems died. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but those crucial seconds of darkness were all she needed. She burst through the access panel into the navigation core, Elena and Kai converging from opposite directions. The core itself was a wonder of ancient engineering, crystalline matrices storing 3 centuries of navigational data, quantum processors calculating courses through dimensions humans barely understood. At its center sat a single terminal, designed for direct interface with the ship's guidance systems. There. Kai ran for the terminal while Rowan and Elena stood guard. Around them, the sounds of battle grew louder as Dr. Kim's improvised rebellion clashed with Commander Hayes' security forces. Kai's hands flew over the navigation controls, downloading the ship's true course data and comparing it with stellar cartography from Elena's archives. Got it. I can see the actual coordinates for New Eden, It's real, but we passed it 200 years ago. There's another system, though. Kepler 442. 3 potentially habitable worlds. How long to get there? Elena asked, checking her scanner for approaching security teams. At our current speed? 47 years. Do it. Kai began entering the new coordinates, but alarms started screaming throughout the core chamber. On the display screens, Director Chen's ancient face appeared, his synthesized voice filled with mechanical rage. Stop this immediately. You are destroying 3 centuries of careful work. 3 centuries of slavery, Rowan shot back, keeping her weapon trained on the entrance. Slavery? We have given your people purpose. Meaning. Without our guidance, you are nothing but animals drifting in the void. Elena laughed bitterly. Animals? We're human beings. We deserve the right to choose our own destiny. Choice is an illusion for the weak-minded. Director Okafor's face joined Chen's on the displays. We have evolved beyond such primitive concepts. The navigation systems chimed as Kai completed the coordinate entry. Course laid in. All I need to do is engage the main drives and... The core chamber door exploded inward. Commander Hayes led a squad of security officers through the smoke, their weapons raised and ready to fire. Behind them came something far worse, Director Petrov himself, his ancient body supported by a mechanical exoskeleton that moved with spider-like precision. Step away from the controls, Hayes commanded. This ends now. Director Petrov's mechanical voice scraped through the chamber's speakers. You have seen the truth, and now you understand why it must be hidden. The mass of humanity cannot handle such knowledge. They require guidance. Control. Purpose. They require freedom, Elena replied, positioning herself between the security team and Kai's terminal. Freedom? Petrov's laugh was like grinding gears. Freedom is chaos. Freedom is the death of progress. We have eliminated war, poverty, social unrest. We have created paradise. You've created a prison, Rowan said. And we're breaking out. Kai's hand hovered over the final control. Course change initiated. 5 seconds to engine ignition. Kill them, Hayes ordered. The security team opened fire. Elena threw herself sideways, her body shielding the navigation terminal as energy bolts scorched the air around them. Rowan dove for cover behind a data processing unit, returning fire with her stolen security weapon. For seconds, Kai announced calmly. Director Petrov's exoskeleton scuttled forward with inhuman speed. Mechanical claws extended from his arms, reaching for Kai's throat. I will not allow 300 years of work to be destroyed by children. Elena struggled to her feet, blood streaming from a weapon burn on her shoulder. 3 seconds. Rowan broke from cover, tackling Director Petrov's mechanical body. The ancient cyborg was stronger than any human, but his 3-century-old systems were slower than her desperation. They crashed into the navigation console together. 2 seconds. Petrov's claws raked across Rowan's back, but she held on, keeping the cyborg away from Kai's controls. 1 second. Elena. Kai shouted. The manual override. Hit it now. Elena slammed her palm down on the emergency activation switch. Throughout the Endurance, the great engines that had been locked on their circular course for 3 centuries suddenly roared to life. The ship's acceleration threw everyone to the deck as the vessel broke free of its programmed orbit and began its journey toward a real destination. Director Petrov screamed, a sound of electronic fury that echoed through every speaker on the ship. You have doomed them all. Without our guidance, they will destroy themselves. They will. His voice cut off as Elena yanked the neural interface cables from the navigation core. On the displays, the images of the 3 directors flickered and died. After 300 years of hidden control, the puppet strings had finally been cut. The Endurance's observation deck had never seen so many people. In the 3 weeks since the revolution, thousands of citizens had come to stare out at the stars, watching the constellations slowly shift as their ship traveled toward its new destination. The sensation of actually going somewhere, of having a real purpose beyond mere survival, had transformed the entire vessel. Work crews sang while they repaired decades of deliberately neglected systems. Children played games that involved reaching actual destinations rather than endless maintenance of the status quo. Rowan stood before the great viewing ports, holding her grandmother's star chart. The ancient paper was yellowed and fragile, but the stellar positions marked on its surface were finally changing as they should. For the first time in 15 generations, the Keeper's charts were showing humanity's true path through the galaxy rather than the same repeating patterns that had marked their orbital prison. The integration teams report that 73% of the ship's population has adapted well to the truth, Dr. Kim said, joining Rowan at the viewport. Her medical uniform bore new insignia, not the controlled hierarchy of the old regime, but symbols chosen by democratic vote. The psychological trauma is significant, but manageable. People are more resilient than the directors ever gave them credit for. Some families have been celebrating the fact that their failed relatives who died in accidents were actually murdered for being too intelligent. And the other 27%? Denial, mostly. Some violent resistance to the new reality. A few suicide attempts from people who can't handle the idea that their entire lives were lies. Kim's expression was grim but determined. 3 centuries of controlled evolution didn't prepare everyone for sudden freedom. But we're helping them adapt. Real medicine, real therapy, real hope for the future. Elena approached from the central data station, her arms still in a sling from the navigation core battle. The archival teams have finished cataloging the director's records. The scope of their manipulation is staggering. Arranged marriages, career assignments, even the food rations were calculated to produce specific social outcomes. Any word from Level 0? Rowan asked. The director's life support systems failed 6 days ago, Elena reported without emotion. Their bodies couldn't survive disconnection from the ship's neural interface. Commander Hayes is in detention, awaiting trial by the new civilian council. Kai joined them, carrying a tablet displaying the ship's current navigation status. Good news and bad news about our course to Kepler 442. Good news, we're definitely going to get there. Bad news, it's going to take 47 years, just as calculated. 47 years, Rowan repeated. Most of us won't live to see it. But our children will, Elena said. And they'll grow up free. Free to choose their own paths, make their own mistakes, find their own way among the stars. Through the observation deck speakers, the ship's new communication system crackled to life. The voice that emerged wasn't the controlled, authoritative tone they'd heard for generations. It was Counselor Martinez, one of the elected representatives of the new civilian government. Citizens of the Endurance, Martinez announced, this is your daily navigation report. Our current position is 47.3 light-years from Sol, traveling at 0.27 light speed toward the Kepler 442 system. Estimated arrival, 46 years, 8 months, 12 days. The crowd on the observation deck cheered. For 3 centuries, no one had known where they were or where they were going. Now, finally, they had answers. Our agricultural teams report that food production has increased 18% since the elimination of artificial population controls, Martinez continued. Our engineering teams have restored full functionality to 17 decks that were kept in maintenance mode to simulate resource scarcity. Most importantly, our children's education programs are being redesigned to teach real history, real science, and real hope for the future. Rowan smiled, watching the stars will slowly past the viewport. Her grandmother had been right, they were distant suns, and somewhere among them waited worlds that humans had never seen. The Endurance was no longer a prison ship traveling in endless circles. It was an ark, carrying humanity's children toward a new tomorrow. So what happens now? Kai asked. We've got nearly 50 years before we reach Kepler 442. That's a lot of time to fill. Elena consulted her tablet, which displayed work schedules that were no longer being manipulated by ancient cyborgs. Well, we need to completely restructure the ship's social systems. Establish new educational programs. Figure out how to manage resources without artificial scarcity. Plan for actual colonization instead of endless imprisonment. In other words, Rowan said, we need to learn how to be human again. The observation deck was filling with families, children who would grow up knowing the truth about their journey, parents who could finally plan for a future that extended beyond the ship's hull. Among them moved the new keepers, young people trained not to guard secret knowledge but to share it with everyone. Rowan folded her grandmother's star chart carefully and placed it in the archive case that would preserve it for future generations. No longer would the knowledge of navigation be hoarded by a single family. The stars belonged to everyone now. As the Endurance continued its journey toward Kepler 442, Rowan thought about the choice Director Petrov had offered her in those final moments before the revolution: join the controllers or be controlled. But there had been a third option, one the ancient cyborgs had never considered. Freedom. It was messy, complicated, and sometimes painful. It meant making mistakes and living with the consequences. It meant uncertainty about the future and responsibility for their own choices. But it also meant hope. Real hope, not the artificial comfort of guided evolution. Hope for new worlds, new possibilities, new chapters in humanity's story among the stars. The keeper of the last star chart had done her job. The charts were free, the ship was free, and 30,000 human beings were finally traveling toward their own chosen destiny. Behind them, the circular course that had trapped their ancestors for 3 centuries grew smaller with each passing hour. Ahead lay the unknown, dangerous, uncertain, and absolutely beautiful. The revolution was over. The real journey had just begun.